Hey there guys, Gary here again for GenVFX. Today what I thought I'd do is just go through my process for doing studio lighting. I know there's a lot of people who do things out there, and there's been some very well known, very well appreciated Blender people out there who have done studio lighting setups before, and I want to very quickly go through what I always do when I do a studio lighting setup, just because I like it and it kind of works. So just so I haven't got to try and build anything. I've already got something that I've built in. It's kind of it's meant to be a kind of a lamp. It's got glass top that makes it look a little bit like it's a lava lamp, but it's not actually a lava lamp. And then it's got a kind of a weird metally bottom. Oh, metally bottom. And then it's got a bulb in there, which has got a filament in there. And these have basically got, obviously, a cable with a switch. And these have actually already got shaders on them. If I just basically hit 12, you'll be able to see from a straight viewpoint. You can kind of see there's and pretty much every single one of these, apart from the actual filament itself. And of course, every single one of those is a Principled BSDF. So, apart from the filament, so it's simple enough. But obviously, it looks a bit weird. It's got nothing in it apart from the standard background color. Let's set the strength in that to 0, for example, and we'll see, and everything goes black. Apart from obviously things that are being lit by the little filament, and obviously there's a little bit of denoising going on there, which is making a few errors and stuff. But not worried about that. Not worried about that. I'll just set that back to 1 for the time being. But I'm going to go into the process of what I generally do when it comes to doing something to make it feel a bit more realistic, or at least if you want to show something off, how to start off by how to show something off. And the most important thing that you need to have is it to be standing on something, because in a minute that is floating in the air. Yep, that's it. There's nothing underneath it. There's nothing behind it. And, people kind of sometimes make the error of trying to put a big floor in, but a big floor is pointless because you need a wall. But they don't really want the walls through the wall. And there's no point reinventing the wheel. This has been discussed and done for years by photographic studios. In fact, this is the main point. If you want to do lighting that looks right, you've got to do what they do in a photographic studio. So the first thing you need is a floor and a wall that join together with a nice arc in them. That is what they call in the trade a cyclorama. So let's very quickly build a cyclorama. Let me just get rid of all this. So I'm inside of my lamp, so let's do that. Make sure I get a new collection. I'm going to call this env lights, because it's going to be the environment and the lights. So in here, let's add to cube. Actually, it's probably because I'm normally using the default cube. And I am going to go into edit mode. I'm going to go GZ1. So that puts that in edit mode on the floor. Then go back to object mode and check. And let's move it back to here. And I'm going to go into the modeling view here. Let's just get rid of that window there. And I'm going to press Alt, Control, and Q all at the same time, so I can see in all of my views. In fact, I'm going to show you something else that you can do in quad view, which is quite good. If you didn't know, if you go down to quad view in your content menu at the side here and click on box, that basically links all of those together. So if you make a change here, consequently makes a change over here and here. So it just means that every time you have the same in your orthographic views in quad view, you have exactly the same scale. So it's a better way of judging how things are. Right, so very quickly, first things first, let's go into polygon mode. Let's select the polygons we want, which are that one, and that one, and this one, and that one. And let's delete them. Yep, just delete those all faces. Nope, that didn't go right. What did I do? Ah, sorry. That one, delete the face. That one, delete the face. And that one, delete the face. And that one, delete the face. We don't need any of those. We just want the two very simple polygons that are there. Let's go into edit mode. Let's select those and we'll pull these forwards so they come to about here, and then select all of them. I'm going to scale them that way. So there's the ground, and then we'll take these two and we'll lift these two up like this. Now that you say to yourself, but that's a flat edge and a flat back. Well, yeah, that's correct. So what we need to do now is we need to do a bevel. Now you can do it in here if you want to, but again, modifiers being what they are a lot better. So let's go in a bevel modifier, and immediately it's only going to do it on the one joined edge, which is the one at the back. So let's change this to a higher value, and let's start increasing the segments in there. And guess what? That's a cyclorama, just like that. And if you look here, you can see I've got it outside of the constraints of my render view. So if I hit F12 now, you can see there is something underneath it and something at the back. Now obviously the only lights we have in there still, apart from the obviously a little bit of GI, which is causing a little bit of this sort of nice stuff underneath here, is the lighting from our environment, which is grey, and the lighting from our lamp, which is that lovely glowy bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the colour of this background. I'm going to bring it all the way down to almost but not quite black. I actually want a little bit of value in there, and then I press that again, and you'll see now there's still practically nothing there in terms of light, and obviously you've got things cleaning themselves up and trying to make things look fancy. But it's not completely black. That is in fact just genuinely better. So once we've got this, now what we need to think about is how we're going to light up this thing. So I'm going to press Alt, Control and Q just to pop out. Now most studio lighting, you can do wonderful things with as little as one light. It's about picking the right kind of light. So in most cases, what you'll generally have is you will have a lamp over here with a soft box on it. So it will globally light it up in some way, or over here, maybe behind the camera, pointing directly at it with a softbox on it. So there's a global light, and the light will be dialed down so it's not too bright. And then that'll be your main fill light, and then you'll have a couple of key lights. And then mostly when you've got a background like this, what'll happen is you'll start getting shadows, which you don't particularly want. So you'll have another light which lights to the back of this to basically blow out the shadows, and also sometimes you have them pointing a little bit further back. So they could be directly down or pointing back towards the cyclorama. So you end up with a kind of a shadow negator, but you can also use it for lighting up the background as well. So it actually helps to flatten it off, because there will be some light difference normally in those curves. Now we are blessed in Blender, in Cycles, with, as you are with most photoreal renderers these days, by having area lights. Area lights, they're great. I'm a big fan of area lights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by adding a single area light in here. Now what I will do is I'm going to go to shading here, and I'm going to change this. Here's our shader slot, that's fine. I'm going to change this to another 3D viewport, and I'm going to press it to 0, and I'm going to tick on, if I can, the rendered view, so you can actually see this now. And let's just go back to our render settings very briefly. I want denoising when I want it in the viewport. I don't want optics really. I'll just use automatic. Oh, look at that. That is absolutely horrible, isn't it? So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn that off. Yeah. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more lighting, because what we're getting there is basically noise from, if I set that up to 128 and do a little sort of a jig on this and then put it back to 0, it's the amount of samples that it's creating in the viewport. And the more samples it creates, the more accuracy it is, obviously, but of course it's slow. What you will get in there, you can see though, is if I was to increase the render settings on that, you can see it's nicely lighting up. It's actually getting a proper global illumination from that filament that we've got in there, which is great. But adding more lights will solve that issue. So let's send that back to just 2. Let's put it on 64 anyway. I'm now going to add in here, I'm going to add a light, and I'm going to add an area light. Now, as you can see, it's just sitting underneath and it's pointing directly down. So if I lift this up, and if we push this over here, you can see it's now lighting up our little scene. But that's not what I want it to do. Okay, let's just make that completely clear. In fact, just to make life a little bit easier, I'm just going to go in here, I'm just going to turn off the filament, just so it makes things a little bit quicker and a little bit nicer to see. This light is actually what I'm going to use for our fill. So I'm going to bring this one over here, and I'm going to rotate it up. And the great thing about this is you can actually see exactly where it's pointing. I'm going to move it down here and I'm going to bring it back. Now I'm going to kick it slightly to the left, just a little, and I'm going to rotate it around. Let's bring this down. And I'm just going to rotate it so it's just kind of putting slightly more at the lamp. And you can see this, it's almost like a tiny bit of diffuse light in there, just a teeny tiny bit. And the reason for that is because it's very low watts. It's about 10 watts. So I'm going to put that up to 60 watts. Now all of this essentially is real world size. So a 60 watt light bulb in here is the same as a 60 watt light bulb in your home. So it's getting a little bit of luminance there. Now partly that is because of its size and the fact that it's a square, but it's not really doing a huge amount. You can see it's kicking up a little bit here. In fact, if anything, maybe I'll just take it down a bit more because it's not hugely important. It's there to give a little bit of light. I don't want it to be the main light, but it's just that as it is a fill, it gives the general lighting to the scene. So what we need to do now is, and I will come back to the cyclorama. In fact, let's do this first of all because it's not going to material on it. Now I have got one built, which is called Cyc, which I'll drop on quickly. So what I'm going to do now with that, I'm just going to rename that light. I'm just going to call that fill. And the cube I'm going to call Cyc, because that is what it is. It is a cyclorama. So that is there where it should be. And now I'm going to add a new light. And this is going to be one of our first main area lights. So in it goes. I'm going to move it up, and I want to be able to set, what I want to do is I want this to be over here pointing at this lamp over here. So let's get it into rotate. Press N on here, let's press N on there and get rid of that one. Zoom in a bit there so you can see better. And I'm going to set that to 90, so it's pointing directly that way. I'm now going to move it over here, and as if I'm treating with a proper light, I'm going to change it to a rectangle, and that way if I get into the corner I can shift the shape of this, and as you will see, even though it's not actually pointing at the lamp, you start to see that reflection in the base metal of this lamp area. So it starts to actually look like metal. So what I'm going to do is going to rotate this to about here. I'm going to move it here, and I'm going to bring it back. So it's not encroaching any area of our camera, which is just here, but you can definitely see it's doing something in here. Now, I don't want that to be that. I don't want that to be 10 watts. I want it to be more like 1,000 watts, a 1K light. So I'm then putting that on to 1,000 watts. Now straight away what you can see here is you can see the reflection on the metal, which is kind of a ever so slightly brushed, just dimpled, maybe more to the point, of a metal. It's sort of a kind of a chromy, kind of a brassy sort of colour. I kind of like the colour, so I stopped it there. And so what you're getting is essentially that studio kick, and you're getting it, you might notice. If I just bring this down, here we're getting it just on the metal and a teeny tiny bit on the glass. Now that's kind of a lovely thing, because it's that whole thing about using light to shape what you want. If I just do this now, if I push this tighter in, you'll notice there's a very strong shadow appearing here. So what I can do is I can soften this by making it wider. And by making it wider, I'm blowing out the shadows. Can you see how they're getting lost further away? But also what I'm doing is giving it a better source for its reflection. So we're getting a much broader, and it looks more, because we now have a tabletop for this to sit on, and we have a light being reflected into it, it has much more of a realistic feel. Straight away, that looks a lot nicer. And what I'm gonna do is, while that's there, I'm going to add a second key, and the second key will be a very similar sort of affair on the other side, but I'm going to make it a bit longer and thinner, so it's not quite as wide as that one. Now, best way to do this is just go Shift D in here and then press Escape. I'm going to change the transform orientation to global, so I can drag it across so it's approximately in the same place. And then I'm going to go into rotate. So let's just set that back to local. And I'm going to turn this, and I'm going to pull it round and point that at our lamp. And now you can see now basically what we have. We're almost there for a studio shoot, because we've got these beautiful two beautiful key lights lighting in, going in and picking out strong form on the metal object, and that's really nice. It really works well. Don't have a lot of stuff going on here. We have a bit of reflection and niceties happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this down here. If you can see, I'm moving that reflection further around here, and I'm going to point this. If I can get it, oh, I'm keep on dragging it. Oh, there we go. More at this. It's a little bit further back now. So it's actually adding a little bit of kick on here. Not a lot, but just a little bit. And I'm going to move this back a little bit more. So again, it's a little bit more on that edge. So it's adding form still. I quite like it being in the front, but I want to do something. I want to add something here, which will do a similar thing, but it will be a little bit different because it's not going to be anywhere near as powerful. But I just want to have a little bit of another shape here. What I really want here is some sort of like another one of these area lights, but just to give me a little round shape, just something a little bit more like as if there's a light that's been reflected back off the inside of an umbrella, and it sort of adds like a real sort of like sharp sort of like right. It's if it could be described as a sound, it would be this. There you go. With my one good hand. Right, so I'm going to create a new area light, and this time I'm just going to do it from the top again. I go light, and we go area light, and where it says shape here, square, I'm going to change it to disc. So let's pop that down there, and let's take this itty bitty disc light. Where have you gone? There we are. I'm going to bring this back, and let's rotate that and set that again to 90. And at the moment you can see it here, right there. So let's move it up, and let's move it across, and let's move it up again. Maybe about there. I'm going to move it this way, and I'm going to rotate it ever so slightly. There we go. So I've now got this other separate little light just in there, this other shape. I am going to make it a bit bigger. Now you'll notice that as I'm making it bigger, it's losing its color intensity. That's because size does matter. And when it comes to lights, if I've got a 1 meter, in fact, you know, if I've got a teeny tiny light that's set to 10 watts, if I had that at 0.5, see, it's a teeny tiny white dot there, which actually works really nicely, and it's picking up in creases here, and the crease in the middle, and the crease down there, so it's really nice. If I make it 10, it's basically dissipated that 10 watts across the entire of the size in terms of the meterage, how big it is. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to do. I didn't want it that big, I only wanted about 5. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to push a little bit of blue into it, because if I can take it further, you can see it's a little bit of blue. And then I'm going to basically make that 5. And that's, it gives you another, it just gives another quality of light into the area, and it still looks like it's coming from a studio light. It's not doing anything that you wouldn't do in a studio. I want another light at the back. I want it a little bit kicky. Maybe don't want it quite that big. Let's make it a little bit more powerful. So you can actually go, I'm going to make it an 8K light. But the problem is that messes up absolutely everything. But a 21, no? 20 watts. That's not so bad. Or maybe just 40. Just something there, just to add a little bit more in. And then, you know, if I wanted to, I could make it gold. I mean, these are the things that I don't recommend doing. I don't recommend you doing anything like that with a light, or like this with a light. Lights predominantly are white, and it's better to try and keep it that way as much as possible. Let's just take the saturation out of this. But the size of this is dictating how powerful it is. So I'm just going to, and in fact, let's just take down that wattage a little bit more. It's a bit sparkly, isn't it? It's a little bit whirring on the eyeballs. I recommend not looking at that too much, and concentrating on what we're doing over here. So all being well, that kind of is that sort of an extra layer of light that's just a bit further away. All being well, I'm reasonably happy with that so far. But my other problem, of course, now is that my cyclorama has absolutely nothing going on. There's no proper lighting on the cyclorama at all, and so that's as flat as anything. So let's add one more area light, and this one I'm going to lift up and I'm going to rotate it this way, and I'm going to move it over here. And this one I'm going to pounce on. There's one. Punch that up. Take it just outside the frame of that. There we go. And now I am going to change that to a rectangle. And I'm going to make it just a nice big diffuse box. So what we have now is, oh, and I just realized I need to set my cyclorama to be smooth. If you can see in the corners around the lamp, you can actually see where it's got a hard edge. Right. So there we go. I've just pulled up a light at the back there. And now what we really need to do is turn our filament back on. And you can now see the bulb that's inside of there as well, lighting all that up. So let's just do this as a proper render, just to see how it's looking at the minute. I'm gonna darken the base color of our cyclorama. Let's just make that a little bit grayer. I'm gonna bring this down a little bit, and I'm gonna leave that one. That's better. Yeah, so we've got the roughness, that teeny tiny bit of quality. You can now see it there in the floor and in the wall. So it's almost like I've taken a long roll of sort of like slightly sheeny raw wallpaper and brought it down. And that filament, I'm going to make the shader on that not as bright. I'm going to make that 250. So hopefully it won't be quite picking into the walls quite so much. So if we now go and render this in our render view, that was what we had before. Absolutely nothing at all. And if I now press F12 and then we render this frame. Now it's rendering it very quickly because I haven't got any fancy settings on it. And I haven't increased the quality of it. But when it comes to going from nothing to something quite sharpish, what you end up with is quite a good looking image that, you know, comes together very, very fast. And when it comes to studio lighting, that's pretty much nailed the studio light. And it hasn't taken us very long, has it? Anyway, I hope that's been of some use to you. Actually, I will do as well. I will do a higher quality render of this right now, just so you can see it properly. But yeah, I hope this has been of some use to you. Very quick studio lighting. Area lights, always area lights. Spotlights you can use, but I wouldn't recommend it. I'd recommend area lights. If you want a nice tight light, basically make the actual physical area of it really close, and you'll get the tight light that you want, but you'll still get the fall off. So you do it with the disc and you get a really nice finish. Please subscribe, tell your mates, do what you can, just say hi. And of course, please, if you want me to do anything in particular, get in contact. I say it's been nice to speak to a few people recently, and yeah, do it. Send me a comment, talk to me, let me know what you think. Take care, guys. Stay safe.